Once upon a time, in a quiet corner of a small American town, there lived an old Vietnam veteran named John. He was known throughout the community for his captivating stories, tales that transported his listeners back in time. On a warm summer evening, a group of eager townsfolk gathered on John's front porch, sipping iced tea and waiting for one of his legendary stories. With a faint smile and a faraway look in his eyes, John began to weave his mesmerizing narrative. It was the summer of '68. He started, his voice carrying the weight of years gone by. I was just a young man, full of life and a head full of dreams when I received that draft notice. Vietnam, a place I had only heard about in the news, suddenly became my destiny. The group leaned in closer as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the porch. Basic training was grueling, John continued, but it toughened me up. I remember the day I first set foot in Vietnam. The oppressive heat and humidity slapped me like a punch to the gut. The jungle, with its dense vegetation and eerie sounds, was a world unto itself. As John spoke, the audience could almost feel the stifling heat and the tension in the air. One day, my squad was sent on a reconnaissance mission in the deep jungle. We moved silently, our senses on high alert. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a hidden village, a place that time seemed to have forgotten. The villagers were welcoming and kind, but it was as if they were frozen in time. The audience hung on his every word, drawn into the story. We spent days with the villagers, and they shared their culture and way of life with us. I learned how to tend to rice paddies, how to cook traditional meals, and I even picked up a few phrases in their language. It was a remarkable experience in the midst of the chaos of war. John's voice became more solemn as he continued. But war has a way of creeping into every corner of your life. One fateful day, we were ambushed. The tranquil village was transformed into a battleground. I watched friends and villagers fall in the crossfire. Tears welled up in the eyes of some listeners as they felt the heart-wrenching reality of war. I was wounded, but I managed to crawl to safety. Alone and scared, I wandered the jungle for days, evading enemy patrols. The jungle became both my refuge and my prison. I saw and did things I wish I could forget. John confessed, his voice breaking. He paused to gather himself, and then continued. After what felt like an eternity, I was rescued by a group of American soldiers. They nursed me back to health and eventually I made it back home. But Vietnam never truly left me. The old veteran's eyes glistened with a mixture of sorrow and pride. I often think of the villagers who showed me kindness, of the friends I lost, and of the jungle that became my unlikely sanctuary. It's a complex tapestry of experiences that still unfolds in my dreams. As the story concluded, the audience sat in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of John's memories. His story had transported them to a time and place that few could comprehend, leaving a profound impression on each of them. John's porch had become a sacred space, where the echoes of history and the lessons of the past were preserved, shared, and revered. And on that warm summer evening, the listeners knew they had witnessed something truly extraordinary, a tale that would stay with them forever, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. John's porch had become a sacred space, where the echoes of history and the lessons of the past were preserved, shared, and revered. And on that warm summer evening, the listeners knew they had witnessed something truly extraordinary, a tale that would stay with them forever, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. In the silence that followed, the crickets serenaded the night, and the stars began to twinkle above. John smiled, the wisdom of a lifetime etched into his face, and he knew that the power of his story was in the way it united hearts and inspired understanding. The porch may have been a physical space, but it had also become a bridge between generations. As John looked out at the expectant faces before him, he knew that his story had bridged the gap between generations, and in that moment, time stood still. The clock may have moved forward, but the echoes of the past had found a home in the hearts of all who had listened, and they would forever remember the Vietnam veteran who had shared his tale of resilience, redemption, and the enduring bonds of humanity. A year later, John's porch remained a gathering place for the townsfolk. The warmth of his stories and the lessons learned from his experiences had not diminished. The listeners, both young and old, returned time and time again to hear more about John's journey through the jungles of Vietnam. One evening, John delved into another chapter of his life. After returning home, I faced challenges that were different from those I encountered in Vietnam, he began. The war had left its mark on me, and I had to find my way in a world that had moved on. The audience listened intently as John described the difficulties of reintegration into civilian life. It wasn't easy, he admitted, but I found solace in a small library. There I came across a book about the history and culture of Vietnam. The pages were filled with images and stories that transported me back to the very place I had tried to forget. It was as if my past was reaching out to me, urging me to make sense of it all. A sense of quiet reflection settled over the porch as John's words resonated with his listeners. They could sense the weight of his post-war struggles, the invisible scars that so many veterans carried. John's eyes focused on a distant point in the night as he continued. That book ignited a spark within me. It inspired me to do something I had never thought I would. I decided to return to Vietnam. The audience gasped in surprise, a murmur of anticipation rippling through the gathered townsfolk. John had taken them on a journey through the jungles of war, and now he was embarking on a new adventure, one that promised unexpected revelations. In returning to Vietnam, John revealed, I was driven by a desire to see the village again, to find out what had become of the people who had shown me such kindness in the midst of war. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of this new undertaking. The audience waited with bated breath for the next chapter of John's story. The following evening, John returned to his porch to continue the saga. My journey back to Vietnam was a mix of emotions, he confessed. I felt a sense of trepidation and excitement as I boarded the plane that would take me back to the land of my memories. As he recounted the sights and sounds of his return, the audience was transported along with him. They could almost feel the vibrations of the plane's engines and the anticipation that gripped John as he neared his destination. Upon his arrival in Vietnam, John was met with a complex blend of familiarity and change. The landscape had evolved, and modernity had touched even the most remote areas. Yet, amidst the transformation, there were remnants of the past that had endured. I arrived in that remote village once more, John continued. To my surprise, I was recognized by some of the elderly villagers. They remembered the young soldier who had shared their hardships. It was an emotional reunion that brought tears to my eyes. The audience, too, was moved by the power of human connections that transcended time and conflict. John's journey was a testament to the enduring bonds of friendship and the lasting impact of moments shared in the crucible of war. I stayed in the village for weeks, John revealed, working with the villagers to rebuild and improve their community. The war had taken so much from them, and I felt compelled to give back in any way I could. As John described his efforts to contribute to the village's well-being, his listeners felt a profound sense of respect for his commitment to helping those who had once been his hosts in a time of strife. If there's one thing I learned from that experience, John shared, it's that even in the darkest of times, connections can be formed, kindness can prevail, and a soldier can return to the land where he once fought as a friend. As the applause from the audience filled the night, John knew that he had not only shared a tale of his own journey but had also inspired others to seek connection, understanding, and healing in the face of adversity. A few months later, John's journey came full circle. As he prepared to leave the village that had once been a battleground, he found himself standing before the villagers who had become his friends. They presented him with a traditional Vietnamese keepsake, a simple bracelet woven from the leaves of a palm tree. They explained that it was a symbol of friendship and resilience. John paused, his fingers gently tracing the worn and weathered bracelet on his wrist. The bracelet serves as a reminder, he said, that even in the darkest of times, connections can be formed, kindness can prevail, and a soldier can return to the land where he once fought as a friend. As the final words of his story hung in the air, the audience on John's porch sat in contemplative silence. They had journeyed with him through the jungles of Vietnam, felt the weight of war, the joy of friendship, and the healing power of returning to a place that had once been marked by conflict. In that moment, the porch was not just a gathering place, it was a sacred space where the past was honored and the future held hope. The listeners knew they had been part of something extraordinary, a story that would forever remain etched in their hearts. John smiled, the wisdom of a lifetime etched into his face, as he looked at the faces before him. His story had bridged the gap between generations and had reminded them that even in the face of war, compassion and reconciliation could bloom. The night was filled with a sense of unity and understanding, and as the final moments of his story drew to a close, the audience realized they had not just witnessed a tale, they had lived it, felt it, and carried it with them into the world. And with that, John's front porch, a place of stories and lessons, of history and humanity, returned to the stillness of the night, leaving the echoes of his extraordinary journey to linger in the hearts of all who had been privileged to listen. The crickets continued their serenade, and the stars above bore witness to the power of storytelling, to the enduring bonds of friendship, and to the indomitable spirit of a Vietnam veteran named John.